Here we are again for Rotation 2 of Abyssal AYufi. I actually had my tuning finished for this team since yesterday. I just had some more numbers to test, so I didn't really get a chance to post until today. Though I'm glad that some other people have picked up on this already, though. Spalgate has, yet again, failed to make us actually use the banner unit in Hall of Trials. This brings their new record to 7 successes, where they've made the best in slot team involve the banner unit, and 12 failures. Better luck next time. So I've also got a top 10% with SSS Plus set up for any new players using nothing but free units, or at least easy to acquire units, and also a top 5% auto team. So if you're looking for those, you can check the videos linked in the description. As always, keep in mind that we have unequip on the last week of each Hall of Trials rotation, so next week. So I would wait until then to not waste gold moving gear around. So we are completely ignoring this 4 Covenant hero, which just means no Moonlight units requirement. Despite losing out on this 30% defense bonus, Lionheart Cermia still does way more damage than Guard Captain Crow. The downside though is that we do not get the Ignore FRES, which means that we are subject to good old 15% RNG, and we also need 85 effectiveness on our debuffers. Before I get into the debuff stuff though, we also lose 20% speed, which sucks, but we can get the necessary hits in anyways by just speeding up our other units. So Dizzy's S3 has 3 debuffs at 100% chance, which combined with Cecilia S2 that has 2 debuffs at 100% chance, gives us 5 debuffs to work with. The chance of us landing at least 4 of the 5 debuffs, with 15% involved, is 83.5%. Now we have to do this 3 times, once for each break phase, which would be a 58.26% chance. Pretty high. On average, you'd only have to reset once. Using Araminta, who only has 2 debuffs on her S3, drops the chance of this down a little bit. You'd have a 52.2% chance to land 4 debuffs, and only a 14.2% chance to actually clear the entire fight, landing all 4 debuffs in 3 phases. It's going to be a little bit harder to tune because you would have to account for 3 units, but if you're using Araminta over Dizzy, I would consider giving your healer 85 effectiveness, and Doris S1 has an 80% chance to land blind. Factoring in 15%, we end up with a 77.23% chance to land 4 of the 5 debuffs if we include Doris, and then we also have the 46.1% chance to do it 3 times in every single phase. Enough of that though, let's get into the roles, alternative units, and stats. Starting off with our DPS, Lionheart Cermia is the best in slot due to her just doing way more damage than Crow, with Guard Captain Crow being the replacement of course. He works fine, he just doesn't do as much damage. I'll quickly note that if you are using Crow, during the break phase you ideally want to S3 first with at least 4 stacks, and then S2 with 6 stacks afterwards. Since his S3 is an AoE, you only need 2 more AoEs after using it to get the 6 stacks for the second hit. Problem though is his S3 CR pushes him by 50%, so it can be hard to tune, making it so that 2 more AoEs go after Crow uses his S3 as you only have half of a turn. In which case, you'd rather just S1 to break defense and then use S2, since a 6 stack S2 is just going to do more damage. Next is our primary AoE debuffer. Dizzy is the best in slot by far. She has 3 100% debuffs on S3 and AoEs on every single skill. Her replacement would be Araminta, who has 2 100% debuffs and 2 AoEs, or Ball and Sezin, who has 2 90% debuffs since the boss is immune to Death Break, and also 2 AoEs. If you're using Crow though, because you'd be able to fulfill the 4 Covenant hero requirement, Araminta's good enough because you don't have to worry about stacking more debuffs to mitigate RNG like when you are using Cermia. And then it's really just, Dizzy is mainly just if you need more debuffs, since you don't have the RGB hero thing, but her having 3 debuffs on her S3 also opens up more options for your tank slot, or at least makes it a bit easier. So for our tank, which has to be a knight, and our secondary debuffer, Cecilia is the best one, 2 debuffs on her S2 and 2 AoEs. Her team-wide immunity is also really nice for reducing the damage we take during the fight. The best replacement would probably be Charlotte. She has 100% unhealable on her S3, but during the first phase you won't have enough fighting spirit to use it because you get sealed. Instead, you have to use her S1, which is a 60% chance to land attack down with her EE, but for Phase 2 and Phase 3, you'll have the Fighting Spirit to use S3 fine. She also has an AoE on her S1, assuming she has a buff, and also an AoE on S3, so she's pretty much got AoEs on every single skill. Brieg is the super budget option. He has 100% debuff on S3, the boss is immune to Death Break, so it's just speed down, but he has no AoE at all. Your healer's S1 debuff, depending on who you're using, can contribute a bit. Doris is a great choice. Not only does she have the 80% blind on S1 if you need it, she just provides a ton of sustain for us. And also she provides a very slight damage increase via defense buff. Her S3 CR push can also be used to change unit positions during your run. For non-ML healers, you can work with Acades or Tamarin. Acades has her usual Great Cleanse and Sustain with her S3, while Tamarin gives you AoEs via her idle S1. Just keep in mind you do actually need to heal up to survive in the later phases especially, so don't go just spamming S1. If you're doing a full RGB team though, you probably drop some speed on Cecilia for more bulk. I have to make everybody pretty fast, and my sustain is pretty low because I'm lacking the 20 speed from the ally enhancement, plus the 30 defense is nice for mitigating a bit of damage as well. Now let's get into everyone's stats, starting off with Cecilia. For Cecilia, if you have her imprint, leave it on team imprint for a very slight damage boost to Cermia. And also, Rise of Monarch is probably the best in slot artifact, 10% defense for all allies, but also the barrier ends up being surprisingly useful for keeping our units alive since it always goes for the person with the lowest HP. For EE, you definitely want to decrease speed of all enemies when using S2. This is the second debuff that she gets when using it. And then for her stats, I have her this fast, mainly just because of the lost speed we have from not meeting the RGB requirement. And also, for tuning purposes, you can run her slower, especially if you're meeting the no ML heroes requirement. Also 85 effectiveness, because we don't have ignore FRES. And then you also want to prioritize your bulk, just because you take a lot of damage during this fight, especially being in the front slot. Next up, let's take a look at Dizzy. For Dizzy, I have her really fast. I don't think she needs to be this fast. You could probably drop a little bit of speed and still be okay. You also need 85 effectiveness. It's mainly just effectiveness, speed, and then the rest of your stats should ideally go into bulk. She has way too much attack. I just kind of geared her kind of randomly and didn't move too much gear around. More bulk would definitely be appreciated. And then for her artifact, I'm using Resolute Soldier series just for the defense. You can run any defense boosting artifact in the slot for your team. And then we have Doris. Doris, I also geared kind of randomly. Is this a crit chance main neck? It is. It's a 20 speed neck for a 226 speed build. This is just kind of random gear. She doesn't need too much bulk. You do want a good amount just to not die during the fight, especially in Phase 3. The main thing is just don't make her too fast, especially if you are trying to do the tunings that I am, where I have no leeway in the break phase, so if Doris is any faster, it breaks my run. For artifact, you can use Card of Small Miracles if you want, or go something like Touch of Rekos for more sustain. The defense boost and also the attack boost are very slight damage increases. This really isn't that necessary. And then lastly, Lionheart Cermia. Lionheart Cermia, of course crit is useless, so go team imprint if you have it. Just max out her defense. As much defense as you can fit onto her. And I'd also recommend making her pretty slow. You can mess with your speeds and see what works well for you, but I actually had to speed her up a little bit because she was too slow, and I didn't want to slow down everyone else. But you just want to make sure that you can get your AoEs in during the break phase. For artifact, I'm using Thorn of a Blue Rose. This is really just because it gives defense. The slight damage increase is nice, but the more important thing is the defense boost. That is it for the team, and now we can take a look at our run. So starting off with this fight, the main thing, like I said, it's a bit rough because our speed is so low. It's fine in the other phases, but specifically in the first phase, where all 4 of our units start at the very back of the CR bar, it is a little bit close. One thing is Cecilia's S3, especially in the later phases. Your timing is a bit limited because you have to S3 during the break phase too, but you can use her S3, the immunity will on the next turn, block the burns from her S2. Besides that, it's pretty straightforward. You're kind of just use Doris S2, and then you just hold all your skills for a little bit. You can see the burns got blocked there. So coming up on this turn, there is a couple of things we can do. So our two debuffers are both going to go before Cermia and after AYufi goes. So the 4 debuff nullifiers are going to go up, and there's 2 ways you can play this. You can either have Doris S1 the egg here, leaving 5% on the bar, because clearing the debuff nullifiers removes 60. That would leave you with 1 hit left, and then Cermia afterwards can do the 1 last hit. And you can enter the break phase without having the issue of not having your AoEs go before Cermia does. The other way is you can have Doris S3 onto Cermia and push her past your debuffers. Now we're down to 60. And that also has the added effect of syncing their CRs, because we still do have CR RNG in Hall of Trials, and this was actually kind of unintentional. I pushed her for a different reason, but this makes it so that since Doris pushed Cermia up to 100% CR, their speeds are synced now. There's no speed RNG or CR RNG between these two. So that's going to be consistent for a while. And now we hope that we land our debuffs. Landed 2. And we're through. One of the debuffs got resisted. We still landed 4, so it's fine. So I will talk about how here I'm running a very, very tight timing, like I said, with Dizzy's high speed, where here I'm going to aim for 6 stacks on Cermia for her first hit to increase my damage dealt. This does mean that you have 0 leeway on how much you can, like, waste hits, because so we have 2 AoEs, and then once you hit 6, it gives 1 extra hit into the break bar. So we do 2 AoEs plus 1 hit with 6, we get us to half already. Then 3 more AoEs to stack the 6 again, that's already 7, and we only have 1 hit left to go. Which means that if you stack the 6 here, your AoEs can't take any more turns than they need to, and Doris can take exactly 2 turns in the break phase, once to S2 and once to S3. If you find yourself being unable to tune that, just use Cecilia S1 here, just don't use an AoE, and you'll have 1 more turn of leeway to work with. I'm fine though, I'm just going to S3 here. And you can see here the increases debuff gauge by an additional 13%, which is just 1 more hit. Now we're at half. Now we're at Doris' last turn, and we have to push somebody. As long as Doris doesn't get a turn again after this, it's fine, but we have to use S3 just to skip a hit. Our choices are really either Dizzy or Cecilia, because we need the AoEs to go in before Cermia goes. And definitely not Doris herself, or she would take a turn before Cermia. I'm going to pick Cecilia, and we're going to hope that Cecilia doesn't cut Cermia. This also does sync their speeds. So now Cecilia, Doris, and Cermia are all tuned with each other. And at the end of the break phase, Cermia is going to be the one pushing AYufi up to 100% when she ends the break phase. So 1, 2, 3, 4 will be synced. It's only going to be Dizzy, who's affected by her starting CR RNG after this. So now we can get the last hit in. And we can see 90, 95, 100. It's going to be like this in all 3 of the break phases, because we'll be repeating the Doris S3 thing. The theme is a little bit rough in the second and third phases, just because our skills are going to be on cooldown. No Cecilia S3 and no Doris S2 is a little bit rough, but Rise of Monarch actually does a very good job here of keeping us alive. Giving barriers to specifically the lowest HP allies helps out a lot. Doris just barely gets the move before Dizzy. And we can Cecilia S3 here. Now we can look at CRs again. It's kind of the same thing as last time. We're gonna Dizzy S3 first. We only landed 2, so we need to see Cecilia land both of her debuffs. And we didn't drop her or leave her bar at 65, so we have to push up Cermia here. So it's fine because we already know what happens when we push up Cermia here and then push up Cecilia later anyways. And hopefully we land. We made it through. I didn't do this in the first phase, but there's no reason really to not S3 and S2 here. This is a little bit close. I'm not sure whether or not this is within CR RNG range. Dizzy might need to be 1 speed slower for consistency, or this could be safe. Not sure. We're again gonna push up Cecilia. And we can see again 90, 95, 100. Again, we're just gonna chill until the debuff phase starts. Here Dizzy gets very dangerously close to dying, but Rise of Monarch is going to be able to save us. That little barrier is just barely enough for us to survive. We'll push up Cermia again. And it's time to pray. Only landed 1. And we only landed 2. Unfortunate. So we're back here again. Please land. Okay, that's 2. And we are in. We actually landed all 5 that time. I also figured out that you actually want the S1 first, because then your S3 and S2 will hit without the defense buff. Might add maybe like 20k damage, very important.
드릴게요. 제 앞에서 비키세요. 돌파하겠다. これ以上この辺でやめませんか？制御がもうこれ以上받아낼 수 있겠어?
Here we are on our final hit. Just for fun, one more time. 90, 95, 100. That's the CR syncing at work there. It'll just be completely consistent. And our final S3.
점점 불타오르는데? 너 마음에 들었어. これ以上하나, 둘, 셋. 막 기대와.
That's it for the run. Let's talk about why we're able to skip the team bonus this time. The team bonus gives 30% defense, and usually on a typical rotation, it's a lot harder to skip this. The problem is, we have a 1,800% defense boost from the hero buff in the break phase, which makes any other sources of defense increase very, very minor. Via my artifacts, I have 10% from Rise of a Monarch, 10% from Resolute Soldier series, and 5% from Card of Small Miracles. And this 25% bonus defense is only a 1.39% defense increase because of the massive 1,800% defense boost we already have. Adding the extra 30% defense from the team bonus on top of my existing 1,825% defense boost would only be a 1.64% defense increase. So this is why skipping the team bonus isn't actually much of a damage loss, and LHC's much higher damage on her S3 easily covers the difference between using her and Crow. This is also why defense buff is actually pretty minor too. Going from 1,825 to 1,875 is still only a 2.74% defense boost. The situation isn't really as prevalent in other Hall of Trials rotations, as usually we only have a damage boost effect during the break phase, so bonus attack ends up being pretty significant. Let's imagine we have 75% attack from Greater Attack buff, 40% from Cruel Mischief, 10% from Warhorn, 5% from Water Shooter, and 5% from Card of Small Miracles, for a total of 135%. Increasing this by 30% to 165% would be a 22.2% increase in attack. A lot harder to cover than just 1.6% difference. This is also why typically damage boost artifacts have been pretty bad in Hall of Trials, since we always have a ton of damage boost during break phase. Even in this one, along with the defense boost, we also had a damage boost. The exception was the most recent DDR rotation, of course, as instead of damage boost, we had stacking damage taken on the boss instead, which is not additive, it's multiplicative. So we actually did use damage boosting artifacts, specifically for the DDR rotation. This is also why Blue Rose is so good in this one. It's just because that flat defense from the artifact stat actually gets multiplied by the stacking effects instead of just being a very minor addition onto them. That's it for this run though, and will the top 100 end up being 100 Cermias? I think it's pretty likely, just because, like I said, the odds of you clearing a run is pretty high. It's 1 in 2. I had the reset once and that was it. You can see some other people using some other options here. This guy did the LHC team with Araminta. Someone's here using Tamarin. And last week you can see one Katie's user and one Charlotte, 2 Charlottes. So you have a little bit of flexibility with your team building. And even with the RNG, it's pretty good chance that you clear. It does kind of suck that the best unit is a collab unit, but happens. Anyways, the next boss is probably going to be Renok with Death Dealer Ray. Not Death Dealer Ray, who is it? Astromancer Elena, I would imagine. It's fun as usual when Smallgate fails to make us actually use the banner unit, but we'll see what happens in the next rotation, and I'll see you guys then.